Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on board this British Airways flight to Brussels.
For Doug Henderson, after only a few hours as Minister for Europe, the business of representing Britain starts now. In flight, he's being crammed by top Foreign Office advisers on the mind-numbing detail of the crunch negotiations on sovereignty which he's plunging into this afternoon. The Minister admitted to me it's a daunting task.
Well, I think it's a fresh start. Putting some of the hostility, the unnecessary hostility between Britain and the other nations behind us, looking positive, looking at the things that are really in Britain's interests, and start negotiating in a tough way with other European partners.
So there's deliberate talk of toughness to balance the most immediate and important reversal of Tory policy in Europe. This afternoon, Mr Henderson will tell the other 14 governments of Britain's willingness to sign up to the social chapter on workers' rights. It's a key commitment of Labour's manifesto. Britain's ambassador at the talks, Sir Stephen Wall, has already changed tack to reflect the new line from the Foreign Secretary in London.
Signing up to the social chapter is in the interest of the people of Britain, and making sure we keep our external border controls is a very important national interest. If we focus on those areas where you must say no, we can actually make our voice heard. If we just shout all the time, as the Conservatives did, then eventually people ignore you.
Mr Blair now has a unique opportunity to chart a pragmatic but constructive course for the United Kingdom. No one wants a super state. Mr Blair therefore doesn't need to shoot arrows against federalist conspirators lurking in Brussels corridors.
Despite those soothing words, in Brussels this afternoon, the new style and the new minister will be put to the test straight away, as other governments start probing how much further they can persuade Britain to go, sharing power and sovereignty in Europe. They'll also want to test what the rhetoric means in practice, particularly Britain's commitment to be a partner and not an opponent. James Robbins, BBC News, at the Council of Ministers in Brussels.
The former Health Secretary, Stephen Dorrell, attacked the government's decision to join the social chapter. He said it would add to the costs of British business and would undermine competitiveness. Well, our political correspondent, John Pienaar, is in Downing Street. John, what's the government signalling by its speed in its moves in Europe today?
Well, I think the government clearly wants to be seen to be playing a full part in Europe as a fully engaged partner from the outset, and drawing a contrast between that and what they see as the years of isolation of Britain under Tory rule. Now, against that, they're very carefully making the point that that doesn't mean that Britain under Labour is going to be a pushover in Europe. They're saying there's no question of Britain giving up the veto on the social chapter on such things as social security, and also arguing that by playing a constructive role, it'll be easier to resist other parts of the package in Europe that they don't like. For example, border controls. Interesting, I think, also to have heard Stephen Dorrell there putting in a quick attack on Labour on this subject. He wants to be seen, I think, to be making the Tories' voice heard at last after that crushing defeat. So the candle of Tory opposition appears to be flickering slightly, but it would be surprising, I think, if the upcoming Tory leadership contest wasn't there somewhere at the back of Mr Dorrell's mind, as it is at the back of most Tories at the moment.
Looking at today's appointments of junior ministers, any surprises?
No great surprises. I think what we've seen today is more appointments to the middle ranks of the government, and mostly the pattern seems to be that those loyalists, those most involved in the Blair modernisation project, have got their reward. So people like Tessa Jowell gets a job in health, the job that she was looking for. Ian McCartney, another loyal member of the transformation of Labour, gets a job probably in charge of the minimum wage. Interestingly, Mr McCartney, though thoroughly aboard with the modernisation project, rather idiosyncratically heads his notepaper, Ian McCartney, Socialist MP for Makerfield. More of a quirk these days than anything else, I would have thought. Also interesting that Stephen Byers gets quite an important job in the education department. He was the Labour member, you may remember, who not so very long ago spoke openly about distancing Labour from the unions, weakening those links yet further. But that upset some union leaders at the time, and they were talking optimistically about Mr Byers in some way being punished. Well, he hasn't been punished, he's been rewarded.
John, thank you. French lorry drivers have disrupted several routes throughout the country in their continuing protest over terms for early retirement. They've been staging snail-pace blockades on roads around Boulogne, Dunkirk and Amiens. But so far, the cross-channel ferry services have not been affected. The rebel forces leader in Zaire, Laurent Kabila, has said his troops are now within 40 miles of Kinshasa Airport. Speaking at his headquarters in Lubumbashi, Kabila said that if President Mobutu did not hand over power in the next couple of days, he'd be chased away in humiliation. The United Nations has had to stop efforts to move thousands of Rwandan refugees by train after nearly 100 of them died in a stampede.
Into the night, hospitals filled with the surviving refugees from the train disaster. Dozens are wounded in the stampede to board the departing train. More than 90 Hutu refugees were crushed to death yesterday trying to get out of the jungle near the city of Kisangani in eastern Zaire. It's not yet known why they panicked. Nearly 3,000 refugees have already been brought out successfully on the train. The Zairean rebel troops who've been trying to force the refugees back to Rwanda have been more in evidence in recent weeks, but others say it was local villagers who attacked them. The man who heads the Rebel Forces Alliance, Laurent Kabila, yesterday rejected diplomatic attempts to halt his advance on the Zaire capital, Kinshasa. This morning he said his troops were within 40 miles of the city's airport. President Mobutu has so far refused to give up his 30-year hold on power, pressing instead for an elected head of state, something the rebels have rejected. The stalemate could be ominous for the 5 million residents of Kinshasa. With no ceasefire, Laurent Kabila is predicting his forces could be ready to enter in 2 or 3 days and may have to fight their way through. With thousands of refugees already fleeing in the east, Western diplomatic efforts are being mobilized. The United States Special Envoy is said to have gone into talks with Laurent Kabila this morning with an urgent message from President Clinton in a final attempt to avoid bloodshed. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
Lincolnshire police are looking for 2 missing boys after the body of their friend was found by an RAF helicopter early this morning. The search for the 3 boys began when their bicycles were discovered yesterday at Horseshoe Point at the mouth of the River Humber.
Family members, friends and volunteers have spent the morning anxiously searching near the coastline. They're concentrating their efforts near Horseshoe Point, where the body of 11-year-old Christopher Scott was found in a gully near Northcotes. He and 2 friends, 9-year-old Nathan Sawyer and Ian Smythe, whose 10th birthday is today, disappeared while playing on tidal marshland at the mouth of the River Humber. The alarm was raised late yesterday evening when the boys failed to return home and their bicycles were found in a car park. Concern for the safety of the 2 other boys is now growing.
There's always hope. The problem being is that it's quite a large area. It's marshland. It's quite a fast incoming tide which can catch people out.
An RAF-seeking helicopter has been combing an area of around 50 square miles, but already the search has had to be scaled down because of an incoming tide. John McIntyre, BBC News.
The world's most powerful chess-playing computer, Deep Blue, has won the latest match against Garry Kasparov in New York. The Russian world champion, playing black, resigned after 45 moves, making it 1 game each. Deep Blue's IBM programming team has vowed to avenge the defeat they suffered in last year's match against Kasparov. There are 4 more games to play. That's it for now. The early evening news is at 10 to 6.
Hello there, well good afternoon to you. I think a fairly dramatic change in our weather over the next 24 hours. Yes, a winter's picture. Why? Because cold air is going to be pushing its way southwards, pushing some heavy rain with it, and that's going to turn increasingly to sleet and snow, in fact quite a number of areas, and we stay in that run of cold northerly winds throughout Tuesday and into Wednesday. This is the latest radar picture showing the extent of the heaviest of the rainfall across northern parts of England, just clearing out of Northern Ireland, moving into Wales. To the north of that it's wintry showers. To the south of it, brighter with some showers this afternoon. That rain continues to push southwards, turning more and more so into sleet and snow, particularly over such areas as the Pennines, the North Welsh Mountains. Wintry showers to the north, and those showers in the south becoming locally heavy and maybe even thundery. Still not too bad in the south, 15 to 17s, but just notice the divide, the much colder air pegging those temperatures back in the north to 7s and 8s in some areas. And then tonight the threat of that snow and sleet pushing its way south into the Midlands, across into the central and southeastern counties by the end of the night. Combine that with the strong northeasterly winds and further heavy rain, I think overnight and through into tomorrow morning there could be some pretty atrocious conditions in some areas, and the clearer skies behind bringing a frosty night into some northern regions. Tomorrow then I think in the southeast probably a pretty bad start to the day. Elsewhere scattered showers, wintry showers in places. The southeast slowly brightening up through the day, but tomorrow a much colder day, temperatures struggling to double digits.
Missiles in the air, missiles in the air.
BBC Radio News. An American F-16 jet has been shot down.
A dramatic reconstruction of the rescue that stunned the world. An astonishing story indeed.
Shot down over Bosnia.
Immediately I'm engulfed in flames.
Lost behind enemy lines.
There were no safe areas, no friendlies. I was alone.
One man's fight for survival.
I just prayed, dear God, don't let me die.
A 999 special, Missing in Action, tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC One.
I do this operation 2 or 3 times a week. He'll be fine. Honestly, I promise.
I couldn't do what you do, Alex. I don't have the self-belief.
All I know is you talked him into this operation, and now he's lying on that machine. And all you're interested in is telling me that it wasn't your fault.
And suddenly, half the world seems to think that I admitted my friend to hospital with the express intention of murdering him.
The Heart Surgeon concludes tonight at 9 on BBC One.
A regional roundup of stories now on BBC One in Newsroom South East with Sharon Doughty.
Good afternoon from Newsroom South East. The Environment Agency is trying to trace the source of pollution which has killed up to 5,000 flatfish and elvers. The fish died on a stretch of the Medway estuary in Kent between Newhythe and Walden. A spokesman said they were having difficulty identifying the pollutant as it's odourless and colourless. It's thought to have come from a riverside factory. The former lead singer of E17 has said he's devastated after discovering one of his fans was raped on a trip to see him. The girl had travelled to London from Southampton in the hope of catching a glimpse of Brian Harvey.
The 13-year-old girl was picked up near the Savoy Hotel in the Strand at midnight by a black cab driver who told her it wasn't safe for her to be alone. She'd sneaked out of her grandparents' house in Southampton and travelled to London by herself. She wanted to see the former star of E17, Brian Harvey. He's sent his sympathy to her and her family. During her 4-hour ordeal, the girl says the attacker kept her prisoner in his cab and drove her to several locations around the capital. He raped her 3 times before dumping her at Waterloo Station. She's described him as white, aged 30 to 40 with receding hair and a London accent. Black cab drivers are horrified by what happened and are convinced the attacker wasn't licensed.
I think these licensed taxi drivers will not do things like that.
It's not unusual for somebody to steal a cab and drive around and use it. It has been known in the cab trade.
Detectives are still appealing for people to come forward with information about the attack, which happened 5 weeks ago. Anne Wright, Newsroom South East.
Ferry companies say they're not expecting any disruption to cross-channel passenger services today, despite action by some French lorry drivers. The drivers are blocking roads to French ports, but so far are only targeting lorries and commercial vehicles. A similar strike last year brought chaos to the continent and Britain. Freight operators are still waiting for compensation from the French government. Research published today shows that London is undergoing a designer clothes boom. 35 top names have opened stores in the last 7 years, and high-class retailers are fighting over prime sites in the capital.
There isn't a top name in fashion unrepresented here on Bond Street. The ones that were missing until last year have been keen to buy up space. The Prada store opens soon, and Donna Karan has moved in just up the road. London now has more designer floor space than Paris, Milan or Los Angeles. Even today, a bank holiday, label addicts were out in force.
Of all European cities, you get a bigger variety in London. Much better than Paris, definitely.
London is such an international capital and all these tourists are coming in. I hope it brings us lots of money.
The designer boom, which has also taken hold round Sloane Street and Covent Garden, is attributed by retail experts to the new image of London as the capital of cool. For foreign designers, it seems, if you haven't got a foothold here, you're simply not on the fashion map. Sarah Morris, Newsroom South East, Bond Street.
Now, always elegant, and he knows about the bank holiday weather. Here's Richard.
Yes, thanks very much, Sharon. It's going to get a lot colder by tomorrow. If you've turned your central heating off, you might have to put it back on again. This afternoon, it's bright, some sunny spells, yes, but the threat of showers around, and I think they may become a bit more widespread and heavy for a time, but temperature's not failing too badly. 15 to 17. Tonight the change starts coming down, much colder air feeding down from the north, bringing the prospect of sleet and snow certainly over the hills, the downs, the Cotswolds, etc. Tomorrow a dull, wet, windy start. Through the day it brightens up, but it's going to be bitterly cold, down to 9 degrees. There you go, wrap up well. Here's Sharon.
I should keep my thermals handy, thank you. That's it for now. There'll be another roundup of news in the South East at 6:05. But from me, goodbye.
two holiday presenters.
Carol Smiley.
Monty Don.
Taken from their natural habitat and put to work. As a silver service waitress.
I've flown with you 4 times.
You could have killed somebody.
And entertainment's organizer.
Normally we would never hire somebody like you.
The glamour and satisfaction of joining in.
Dude, get a tan.
That's the holiday business. Holiday Fasten Your Seatbelt, tomorrow at 7 on BBC One.
The new Radio Times contains features on forthcoming programmes, together with complete listings for all television and major satellite channels.
When there's trouble, there's only one man to call. He's got his hands full.
Lieutenant Frank Driven, police squad.
Is this some kind of bus?
Well, it's very impressive, yes, but we need to ask you a few questions.
And he can smell trouble.
Any other victims?
You're standing on one right now. Oh. Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley.
How are the children?
We didn't have any children.
Star with O.J. Simpson. Naked Gun 2.5, Sunday at 8 on BBC One. A bit more than a sequel.
Well, the UK did it on Saturday night. After 16 years, we won the Eurovision Song Contest. And in 20 minutes, the Ozone reports back from the eventful night with a behind-the-scenes look at the names and the nerves. First on BBC One, a lunchtime rendezvous in Ramsay Street.